Be me, 34-year-old corporate compliance officer at a financial services firm. Spend my days ensuring everyone follows the rules, pointing out violations, holding people accountable. Perfect job for someone who sees the world clearly, who understands power structures. Live alone, have my own money, my own life, answer to no one. Exactly how it should be. Today, some of the older women in accounting are gossiping about marriage rates again. Overhear them lamenting how their sons and nephews won't settle down. Feel that familiar irritation rising. Decide to contribute my perspective during lunch break. Explain to them that men today are simply afraid of strong, independent women. Tell them modern men are commitment-phobic children who want mommy bangmaids, not partners. They look uncomfortable, but I continue. Point out that men have always had the power to define relationships on their terms, and now that women have standards, men are running scared. One of them mentions her son is a doctor and still won't date seriously. I suggest maybe he's intimidated by successful women, needs therapy to deal with his fear of female achievement. She gets quiet, stops engaging. Good, maybe she needed to hear it. The patriarchy protects itself through women like her, making excuses for male inadequacy. Head back to my desk feeling satisfied that I spoke truth to power, even in small ways. Later that week, mandatory compliance training for new managers. I'm running a session on harassment policies and documentation requirements, going through scenarios, making sure everyone understands that accusations must be taken seriously, that we believe victims, that there's no room for skepticism when someone comes forward. Notice one of the male attendees, Liam, looking increasingly uncomfortable. He's maybe 40, works in commercial lending, always been quiet and professional. After the session, he approaches my desk. Unusual because most people avoid me after these trainings, especially men. Liam asks if he can discuss something confidential, compliance-related. I agree, assuming he wants to report something. Maybe finally acknowledging male misbehavior. He closes the door, sits down, and I can see he's actually shaking slightly. Starts telling me about his previous employer, a tech company in Seattle. Says he was accused of inappropriate behavior by a female colleague 3 years ago. Immediately, I feel my defenses go up. Here we go. Another man claiming innocence. But something makes me listen. Maybe just professional obligation. He describes how a woman on his team reported him for making her uncomfortable during a project deadline. Says he had sent work emails at night, had one conversation in the parking lot about the project, had once complimented her work in a team meeting. Claims that was the entire extent of their interaction. She reported feeling unsafe, said his attention was unwanted, suggested there was more he wasn't saying. I'm mentally rolling my eyes, thinking, sure, that's what they all say. But he continues, pulls out his phone, shows me documentation he's kept for years. Emails to HR, investigation summaries, witness statements. The company put him on immediate administrative leave, informed his team there was an investigation, spent 2 months under review, wasn't allowed to defend himself or know specific accusations beyond the initial complaint. Coworkers stopped talking to him, assumed guilt. Finally cleared of all wrongdoing, investigator found no evidence of inappropriate behavior. But by then, the damage was complete. His reputation destroyed, colleagues treated him differently, several people had already assumed he'd gotten away with something. He left within 6 months, took a pay cut to come here, still has anxiety attacks about working with women. Shows me he never takes meetings alone, never emails female colleagues without copying others, never speaks to women in empty hallways or parking structures. Lives his entire professional life around avoiding any possibility of accusation. I find myself getting annoyed at his paranoia, want to tell him this is exactly the problem, men making everything about their fears instead of women's safety. But something in his documentation stops me. The investigation notes, completely exonerating him, also include a line about the accuser having made similar complaints at a previous employer, complaints that were also unsubstantiated. Liam tells me he found this out later through a mutual connection, says he thinks about suicide sometimes, about how one person's words nearly ended everything he'd built. Has a daughter he barely sees now because his ex-wife used the accusation in their custody battle, even though he was cleared. Judge still referenced it, still treated it as evidence of character issues. I want to dismiss this, want to say he's being dramatic. But I'm looking at documents, at therapy bills, at custody agreements. This actually happened to him. I manage some corporate response about our robust investigation procedures here. He leaves looking unsatisfied, probably wanted sympathy I couldn't give. Spend the rest of the day feeling irritated, like he was trying to make me feel bad for protecting women. But something nags at me about the daughter comment, about custody. The weekend comes, and I meet my friend Rachel for drinks. She's going through a divorce, finally leaving her mediocre husband after 12 years. I've been supportive, telling her she deserves better, that she's wasting her life on a man who never appreciated her. She starts complaining about her lawyer's advice regarding custody and assets. Says the lawyer told her she'll likely get primary custody of their 2 kids, that this is standard. Her husband apparently wants 50-50 custody, has been a present father, but the lawyer says courts favor mothers in our state, especially with kids under 10. I tell her that's just correcting for historical patriarchy, that women have been primary caregivers because men refuse to do their share. Rachel laughs, says her husband actually did more childcare than her because her career paid better. Says he was the one doing pickup and drop-off, helped with homework, coached soccer. But the lawyer says doesn't matter, optics favor her, and she should use that advantage. Also says she's entitled to the house, even though his inheritance paid most of the down payment. Tells me the settlement will probably give her the house, his retirement account, and child support, around 40% of his income. I ask if that's fair given he was apparently an involved father. She shrugs, says fair doesn't matter, says this is what he gets for letting the marriage fail. I ask what he did wrong specifically. She admits nothing terrible, they just grew apart, she wanted different things, felt unfulfilled. Says she's actually been seeing someone else for 6 months, met him at a work conference. Describes how her lawyer told her not to mention this, that it won't affect the settlement anyway. No fault state. I feel something uncomfortable in my chest. Ask what her husband thinks about the custody arrangement. Rachel's face changes, gets harder, says he cried, actually broke down crying when she told him she wanted primary custody, said something pathetic about not being able to handle only seeing his kids every other weekend. She seems disgusted by his emotion, by his vulnerability. Says the lawyer explained he'll still be financially responsible, will pay for their lives while having minimal access to them. Tells me her new boyfriend thinks it's manipulative how her husband is making this about his feelings instead of what's best for the kids. I want to agree with her, want to default to my usual position that men need to face consequences. But I keep thinking about those kids losing daily access to their father, who by all accounts was a good parent. Keep thinking about him paying for a house he won't live in, for kids he won't raise. Try to push it away, tell myself this is just the correction of historical injustice. But it sits wrong in my stomach. Monday comes, and there's an incident in the office kitchen. 2 guys from investment services are talking. Don't notice me coming in. One is maybe 28, telling the other about a marriage proposal he's planning. His friend, older, probably mid-40s, is actively trying to talk him out of it. I freeze in the doorway, listening. Older guy is pulling up statistics on his phone, showing the younger one. Says marriage rates are down 40% from the 1970s, says men are opting out for concrete reasons. Younger guy laughs it off, says he loves his girlfriend. It'll be different. Older guy gets serious, starts listing numbers. Says 70% of divorces are initiated by women, closer to 90% for college-educated women. Says in most states, assets get split, but debts and obligations don't. Describes alimony calculations, how many states still award it even for short marriages. Describes how retirement accounts and future earnings can be garnished. Younger guy is looking less amused. Older guy tells him to get a prenup at minimum. Younger guy says his girlfriend would be insulted, would probably leave him for suggesting it. Older guy says exactly, ask yourself why. Why would someone who loves you be insulted by legal protections that only matter if things go wrong? Says if she's planning forever, a prenup is irrelevant, just paper. Says if she refuses, she's planning the exit before the entrance. I'm standing there with my coffee mug, frozen. Want to interrupt, want to call this out as misogynistic fear-mongering. But the older guy pulls up custody statistics next. Shows that mothers get primary custody in 83% of cases nationally, higher in their state. Shows average child support payments, shows how they're calculated on income, not involvement. Describes fathers who pay for children they see 4 days a month. Younger guy asks, what if he's a good father? What if he's involved? Older guy laughs bitterly. Says doesn't matter, says he was involved, coached Little League, made breakfast every morning, taught his daughter to read. still got every other weekend and Wednesday dinners. Says his ex-wife got the house he paid for, gets 42% of his income, just married her boyfriend, and he's raising his daughter. Says his daughter calls the new guy by a nickname that sounds like dad. Says he thought about killing himself last year, actually planned it out. Decided against it only because then his daughter would grow up thinking her father abandoned her. So instead he lives in a one-bedroom apartment at 46, paying for a house he's not allowed to enter, financing a life he's not part of. Works 60 hours a week to cover the support payments, has nothing left for himself, will retire with almost nothing because his retirement account was split. Younger guy is silent now, asks why he got married in the first place. Older guy says he loved her, trusted her, believed the promises. Says his ex-wife wasn't a bad person, wasn't abusive or evil, just changed her mind, decided she wasn't happy, found someone else. Court system didn't care who caused the divorce, just redistributed his life to her and moved on. Says the system is designed for marriage as it existed 50 years ago, when women couldn't work, needed protection. But now it protects no one. Just creates a massive transfer of assets and children from men to women because of tradition and optics. Younger guy asks if he's saying, never get married. Older guy pauses, then says, get married if you want. But understand you're signing a contract that gives the other party power to destroy your finances, take your children, and walk away whenever they choose. Says if any other contract in life had those terms, with those statistics, no rational person would sign it. Says, it's not about love or commitment, it's about risk assessment. Asks the younger guy if he'd invest his entire financial future in a stock that had a 70% chance of catastrophic loss. Younger guy says no, obviously not. Older guy says then why invest your entire actual life in something with worse odds? They notice me finally. Conversation stops immediately. Both look embarrassed, probably assuming I'll report them to HR. I just walk past, get my coffee, leave without saying anything. Can't get the conversation out of my head all day. Try to dismiss it as bitter divorced guy poisoning someone younger. But the statistics were real. I know this because I've seen them before. Always frame them differently in my mind. As women finally having the freedom to leave bad marriages. Never considered what happens to the men left behind, paying for families they lost. Never thought about good fathers being reduced to visitors in their children's lives. Always assumed if men lost custody, they must have done something wrong. Evening comes and I can't focus on my usual routine. End up going down an internet rabbit hole I've always avoided. Men's rights sites, divorce reform forums, fathers' rights groups. Expect to find the usual misogyny, the angry ranting I've always dismissed. Instead, find detailed documentation, legal cases, statistics from government sources. Find studies showing no significant difference in parenting capability between fathers and mothers. Find data showing children do better with equal access to both parents post-divorce. Find court records showing fathers requesting 50-50 custody and being denied without cause. Find financial calculators showing child support obligations that exceed actual child-rearing costs. Find suicide statistics, men over 40 post-divorce at the highest risk. Find support groups for fathers who haven't seen their children in years despite paying support, despite doing nothing wrong simply because mothers can deny visitation and courts rarely enforce it. Find men describing the same fear Liam had, the terror of accusation, the knowledge that their lives can be destroyed by words alone. Find hundreds of stories matching the older guy's experience, good fathers reduced to paychecks and weekend visitors. Feel something cracking in my worldview. Try to tell myself these are outliers, exceptions, cherry-picked cases. But there are thousands of them documented, verified, with legal records. Close my laptop, feeling sick. Next day at work, I'm distracted, irritable. Get into a disagreement with a colleague about a compliance matter. He's pushing back on one of my interpretations of policy. Normally, I'd escalate this, make it an issue. But today, I'm seeing him differently, wondering about his life. Notice he wears a wedding ring. Wonder if he knows the statistics, if he's afraid. Wonder if I've been seeing enemies where there were just people. That afternoon, there's a staff meeting about benefits. HR is presenting updates to parental leave policies. They've added 2 weeks paternity leave, up from 0. Maternity leave remains 12 weeks. One of the younger guys asks why the disparity if we're treating parenting equally. HR representative, a woman I've always respected, says that mothers need recovery time from birth. He points out that 2 weeks wouldn't even cover recovery time, seems arbitrary. Asks if fathers are expected to bond with children and be involved, why not equal leave? She gets flustered, says something about tradition and industry standards. I watch the men in the room, see several of them exchange looks. Not angry looks, just tired, resigned. Like they already knew this was the answer, were expecting nothing else. See them calculating in their heads, understanding that even here in a progressive company with good policies, their fatherhood is valued at 1/6 of motherhood. Meeting ends, and I'm left thinking about what that teaches everyone. What it says when we claim we want involved fathers but structure everything assuming they're optional. Weekend comes again, and I'm at my gym. Overhear a conversation in the locker room. 2 women I vaguely know. One is excited about her engagement, showing off a ring. Other one is asking practical questions about her fiancé's income. Engaged woman describes his salary, his assets, his family money. Friend asks if she's getting a prenup. Engaged woman laughs, says absolutely not. Says asking for a prenup means he doesn't trust her, doesn't really love her. Friend agrees, says prenups are insulting, says marriage is about trust. Then engaged woman says something that makes me stop breathing. Says if things don't work out, at least she'll be set up. Says the house alone will be worth it. Says her lawyer friend already explained that state law is favorable, she'd get primary custody and probably the house. They both laugh about how her fiancé is so in love he'd probably agree to anything. Friend says men are easy that way. Says use it while you can. I want to say something, want to interrupt. But I'm frozen because I realize I've had similar conversations. Different words maybe, more ideological justification, but the underlying assumption was the same. Men's resources are accessible, men's rights are negotiable, men's pain is acceptable. Get home and look at my own dating history. Realize I've ended things with men for wanting commitment, for being too invested. Told myself they were needy, were trying to lock me down, were threatened by my independence. Wonder now if they were just people who wanted partnership, who were willing to risk everything despite the statistics. Wonder if I rejected them because they were willing to be vulnerable, and I held that vulnerability in contempt. The thought is unbearable, so I push it away. Monday brings a new case to my desk. Financial irregularity in expense reports. Possible fraud investigation. The subject is a man I barely know, works in regional management. Start pulling his records and notice something odd. His salary is substantial, but his direct deposit goes to 2 accounts. One is his, minimal amounts. Other is much larger, different name, his ex-wife. Garnishment order from divorce settlement, 45% of gross income. He's been with the company 6 years. This has been going on the entire time. Do some more digging in his file. Purely professional curiosity. Find previous HR notes from when he was hired. He disclosed the garnishment, explained he needed a higher salary to live on what remains. Find a note from 3 years ago, request for hardship advance. His daughter needed medical care. He couldn't afford his share on what was left after support payments. Ex-wife refused to help, said support was for general expenses. Medical was his responsibility. He took a loan against his 401k, which was already depleted from the divorce settlement. Look at his performance reviews, all excellent. See notes about him working extensive hours, taking on extra projects. Realize he's working himself to death to pay for a family he lost. The expense irregularity turns out to be nothing, just a coding error. But I can't stop looking at his file, at the mathematics of his life. Calculate what he actually takes home, subtract taxes and garnishment. He's living on maybe 35% of what he earns. His ex-wife, who works part-time by choice, receives more of his income than he does. Think about this man spending his life as a resource extraction mechanism for someone else's benefit. Close the file. Feeling ill. That week I have lunch with my mother, our usual monthly obligation. She starts talking about my brother, her usual complaints. He's 39, successful architect, still unmarried. She wants grandchildren, wants him settled down. I've always agreed with her, suggested he's commitment phobic, immature. Today I ask her why she thinks he's single. She lists his flaws. Too picky, too focused on work, probably intimidated by successful women. I ask if she's ever asked him directly. She looks surprised, says mothers don't need to ask. They know. Something makes me push, ask her to actually consider his perspective. She gets defensive, but eventually admits he told her years ago he wasn't interested in marriage. Said something about the risks being unacceptable, the laws being biased. She dismissed it as an excuse. Typical male fear of commitment. I ask what specifically he said. She recalls that he mentioned watching his colleagues go through divorces, seeing good men destroyed. Said he calculated that marriage offered him no legal protections and massive liability. Said he'd be happy to have a committed relationship, but wouldn't legally bind himself to someone who could take everything on a whim. My mother had called him cynical, told him love requires risk. He apparently said he takes risks where there's proportional reward, but marriage is all risk and no. Reward for men, legally. She tells me this like it proves his immaturity. But I'm hearing something different. Hearing a rational person doing cost-benefit analysis and walking away. Ask my mother what she thinks happens to men in divorces. She says they remarry quickly, they move on, they're fine. Cite statistics. She's heard about men remarrying faster than women. I mention that might not mean what she thinks it means, might mean desperation rather than ease. She gets irritated, says I'm defending male bad behavior. Realize she sounds like me, like I've sounded for years. Wonder when dismissing male suffering became feminist orthodoxy. Wonder when we started treating men's rational self-protection as moral failure. The conversation ends badly, both of us frustrated. Spend the next few days in a fog of cognitive dissonance. My entire framework for understanding gender relations is cracking. Always believed men had all the power, all the privilege. Believed women were fighting from beneath, claiming our rightful equality. Believed men who complained were just angry about losing unearned advantages. But the evidence I'm seeing doesn't support this. See men afraid to be alone with women professionally. See fathers destroyed by family courts regardless of their parenting quality. See men's financial lives gutted by divorces they didn't want. See men's emotions dismissed, their vulnerability mocked, their suffering ignored. See marriage transformed into a legal trap that only a fool would enter. See men responding rationally to systemic risks and being called cowards for it. Try to talk about this with my friend circle. Test these thoughts. Bring up Liam's story obliquely. Ask what they think about false accusations. Immediate response. Believe all women. Accusations are rare. Men lie about being falsely accused. Mention the statistics about custody and divorce. They say men don't want custody anyway. Men aren't good at childcare. The statistics reflect reality. Suggest maybe the marriage rate decline is rational from men's perspective. They say men are just afraid of strong women, intimidated by equality, refusing to grow up. Every response is a mirror of what I've said, what I've believed. Hear my own words coming back to me and recognize them as defensive mantras, not analysis. Realize we've created an ideology that can't accommodate male suffering. Any problem men face gets reinterpreted as either deserved, exaggerated, or secretly caused by other men. We've made it impossible to acknowledge that our movement, our legal changes, our social progress has created new injustices. Sit with this for days, feeling my worldview collapsing. Everything I've believed about gender, power, privilege, and patriarchy is revealed as partial at best. Men do have some privileges, some advantages. This is true. But they also face systemic discrimination, legal vulnerability, and social disposability I've refused to see. The patriarchy I've blamed for everything doesn't seem to be protecting these men. Liam nearly destroyed by an accusation in company policy. The older guy from investment services paying for children he can't see. My colleague working himself to death to fund his ex-wife's life. My brother rationally opting out of an institution that offers him only risk. Countless fathers denied custody despite being good parents. Men living in fear of accusations that can end their careers without evidence. Men facing financial ruin and divorces they didn't want. Men mocked for their emotions while being told they need to be vulnerable. Men's spaces eliminated. Men's issues ignored. Men's lives treated as expendable. And I've contributed to this, actively participated in dismissing their pain. Called them privileged while they were suffering. Called them afraid while they were being rational. Called them toxic while they were being destroyed. Treated their self-preservation as misogyny. The worst part, the part that makes me want to to vomit, is understanding what I've done to individual men in my life. The men I've dated and rejected with contempt for being vulnerable. The colleagues I've suspected and avoided, contributing to their isolation. My own brother, whose rational fear I've dismissed as cowardice. Liam, who came to me in pain and received corporate boilerplate instead of human recognition. I think about the younger guy planning to propose. Hope he listened to his friend. Hope he understands what he's risking. Hope he protects himself. Because the woman he loves, no matter how good she seems now, will have the power to destroy him completely. And the legal system will help her do it. Will treat his destruction as righteous wealth redistribution. Will take his children and his assets and his future and tell him he's lucky she's letting him see his kids at all. Sit at my desk on Friday afternoon, looking at compliance files, seeing everything differently, all these rules I enforce, designed to protect women, to believe all accusations, to assume male guilt, necessary perhaps, addressing real problems, but also creating new problems, new fears, new injustices, men tiptoeing through their professional lives, afraid one misinterpreted comment ends everything. The marriage rate declining isn't men being childish, it's men being rational, protecting themselves from laws that treat them as resource deposits with no rights. Modern women like me, like my friends, like Rachel, have become unbearable risks. We have all the legal power in relationships and family courts. We can destroy men's lives with accusations, divorce them, and take everything, deny them their children. Society believes us automatically, supports us unconditionally, dismisses male suffering as deserved. And we've wrapped this power in the language of victimhood and equality, claimed we're still oppressed while wielding weapons men have no defense against. I've spent years being angry at men for having power I claimed they didn't deserve. Never noticed I held their lives in my hands, their futures subject to my whims. Never noticed the patriarchy I railed against wasn't protecting them at all. Never noticed that in family law and HR policies and social assumptions, I had all the power, and I've been insufferable about it, self-righteous, contemptuous, treated men's fear as pathology instead of recognizing I was the threat. The realization hits me fully as I'm leaving work that evening. Past Liam in the parking lot, he avoids eye contact, takes a different route to his car to avoid being near me. Watch him alter his path, see the fear in his body language. Understand that I'm part of what broke him, part of the system that destroyed his life. Get to my car and just sit there, hands shaking. My entire framework for understanding the world has been wrong. Not completely wrong. Women do face real problems. Sexism exists. But I've been so focused on those problems that I made myself blind to everything else. Made male suffering invisible, male fear illegitimate, male self-protection into villainy. And in doing so, I became exactly what I claimed to oppose. Became someone who wields power without accountability, who demands special treatment while claiming victimhood, who destroys lives while calling it justice. The men avoiding marriage aren't afraid of strong women. They're afraid of me, of what I represent, of the legal and social weapons I can deploy. They're afraid of losing everything they build to someone who can leave on a whim. Afraid of being separated from their children by courts that don't value fathers. Afraid of accusations that end careers without evidence. Afraid of being ground down into paychecks for families they're not allowed to be part of. And their fear is completely, entirely, devastatingly rational, because I've seen it happen over and over to men who did nothing wrong. Men who loved and trusted and committed and lost everything. Sit in my car as evening becomes night, watching people leave work. See the men walking alone, separated by conscious distance from female colleagues. See them getting into cars to go home to empty apartments because the risk is too high. See them protecting themselves the only way they can, through isolation and avoidance. And I finally understand. I'm not the victim of patriarchy. I'm the beneficiary of a system that privileges my accusations over their lives, my choices over their futures, my feelings over their reality. And I've spent years being insufferable about it, demanding even more while giving nothing. The men aren't the problem. I am. We are. Drive home in silence, my whole worldview in ruins, understanding finally why men will never marry modern women like me. Because we're not partners. We're legal threats with all the power and none of the accountability. And they're not afraid of our strength. They're afraid of our cruelty. which we've disguised as justice for so long we can't even see it anymore.